more often than not, they'll lay it out and go, well, what do you think you should do? And they're like, well, I came in here because I don't know what to do. Like, yeah, but you're in it. So what does your instinct tell you? And again, you're empowering somebody who's not sure of themselves, right? And they'll present their concept, and maybe it's a good idea, or maybe it's I tried that once, lost my shirt, or it blew up in my face, but let's work on this together. Or that's great, let's do that, and then I have their back with them implementing this new idea. That's how you grow people.
Tap into innovation at IAAPA Expo, the biggest industry event of the year.
Join us and other Attraction Pros in Orlando, Florida, November 18th to the 22nd to engage with the global community.
Learn from the experts, leave with new ideas, and turn your passion for the industry into new possibilities.
Register now using the link in the show notes to save up to 30%.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going fantastically. Josh, how are you?
Doing well. Question.
Yes.
Did you know fireworks could be silent?
No, I did not. And I think about fireworks that I've seen, and I don't know that I've ever seen an actual silent one, because they all make some noise. Whether it's the really loud bang or just little pops here and there, but I don't know they could be silent.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, sort of. I'm like kind of jogging my memory from a long time ago. One of the professors I had in college was Ron Logan, who prior to becoming a professor at Rosen College was the executive vice president for Walt Disney Entertainment. And one of the things I learned in the class was when they were developing Disneyland Paris, or I should say Euro Disney, as it was called when it opened, there was a noise ordinance around it that didn't allow them to have the traditional fireworks show that they had at the other theme park resorts around the world. But what is a Disney park without fireworks? So they utilized that technology to make the fireworks silent, but then pumped in the boom noises through the speakers in the park so that guests couldn't necessarily tell the difference or still heard the sound. I mean, you associate fireworks, you see it and you hear it,
You hear
right?
it.
And you feel it in some cases too, right? I had not thought of that in a very long time. So if anybody wants to fact check me on that, please do. I'm not claiming 100% accuracy, but I think I'm in the ballpark, in the theme park. That should be the thing, A lot of
What's
theme
that?
parks hold more than a ballpark.
Yeah.
So that should be the phrase. Like,
Okay.
give me a ballpark estimate. Give me a theme park estimate.
Give me a theme park. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a new thing starting today.
Hashtag.
Hashtag. But our guest today also brought up silent fireworks, but in a very different context and something that was actually very moving and very powerful. Kile Ozier is the guy at The Guy LLC. And we get to learn about his title and the name of his company and a lot of other things in this amazing interview.
So he is the guy, right? And you might be saying, well, what does that mean? Well, Kyle's going to tell you more specifically, right? And where it came from. But what I think you're going to get from this interview, this conversation, is the wide-ranging knowledge that Kile, the guy, has, and why the guy has become his title. Because there's so many different things, so many different avenues that he can go down in terms of the content around experience creation and driving emotional experiences, that it's really fascinating to kind of connect the dots and find the through line to all those different things that he talks about. And at the end, I was like, okay, I get it. This is why he's called the guy.
Yeah. And in addition to the guy, he's also the creative venture catalyst. He is the master of spectacle and story, and he's a writer, producer, and show director as well. If those weren't enough already to describe him, to define who he is, one of the biggest themes in this interview was about emotion and very intentionally, and I think he used the word manipulating people's emotion towards what it is that you're trying to achieve, towards the story that you're trying to tell. And so we talked about moving people emotionally. So the silent fireworks example he gave, and I don't even think I can begin to paraphrase the story of it, but it was at the Lincoln Memorial, and it was this amazing tribute. And there was somebody reading a passage in a letter to a friend and singing a song. You know what? I'm not even going to say anything more than that, because I'm going to let Kyle do it. But that was one of, I would say, the biggest and best examples I've heard of really getting people to the emotion that you are desiring. And we see it in theme parks, we see it in movies, we see it, all over, of what's the feeling that that the creator is trying to create from their audience.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that he talks about that I think is a fairly simple technique, but also very powerful and can be very insightful to the experiencer, is to take them someplace that they are not familiar with. For example, if you go into a building and you go in the same way every single time, take them in the side door, right, as part of this experience. Take them up the fire escape. Take them someplace that they haven't been, so that automatically gets them into a different mindset, so that you can evoke the emotion that you're looking for.
Yeah, which was really cool to hear the stories that he shared from that. He also talked about creating global community through shared experience. So this is the Attraction Pros podcast. We talk about theme parks and roller coasters and zoos and museums and aquariums and family entertainment centers. And this was not off topic, I would say, at all. But it took what we do so much deeper. He talked about feeding starving children in Uganda. Can he do that? No, but how can he use the creative talent that he has to at least start those conversations, to be able to, well, we're moving people emotionally. Can that be part of the stories that are shared? And he gave so many other examples of creating global community. And the message I heard from him was unity. It was peace. It was love. It was joy. It was so many positive attributes that we all have the ability to be able to influence with what we do.
And he also talked about the joy of connecting. And I think that encapsulates a lot of the things that you talked about. But in terms of connecting with another human being, connecting with the world around you, and how that can be a positive and joyful experience if you allow it to be, if that's what you look for that to be. And, the kind of the undertone of some of the things that he was talking about is, it's a choice that we make. We make a choice to go down a certain path, or, interact with someone in a certain way, or just be forgiving of, what they might be doing. And so that, again, creates the opportunity for us to have joy in those situations where maybe somebody else chooses a different path and it's a very different output.
Absolutely. So we could probably keep talking about this interview for a very long time, but should we get right to this conversation with Kile Ozier?
I say let's do it.
Hi, Kyle. Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. We're so excited to have you on today. How are you?
I'm good, Josh. How are you? It's good to meet you and Matt. This is great.
Yeah, great to meet you. We're doing really well, and really excited for this. I feel like this is going to be a comprehensive and wide-ranging conversation. I feel like we have a lot of ground to cover, and I already know it's going to be really inspiring, really insightful, and really enjoyable. So to get it kicked off, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your career. What is the guy? And give us all about that as well.
Okay, and that'll pretty much wrap it up. That'll be about 40 minutes, I think. Okay, in brief, I went to school of Foreign Service at Georgetown. I had a whole idea that I was going to go to the Foreign Service and travel the world, solving problems. And here's what's interesting, ultimately, is that what most of us learned at the School of Foreign Service was we didn't want to go into the Foreign Service, because it's civil service. like any government job, you go in and then you wait for people to retire and die. And no, I'm like, I don't want to wait for that. So I had this idea that I would become an international problem solver, dock strikes in Hong Kong, or it was just this fantasy. So set that aside for a moment. I ended up working on a semester at sea, which is a university on a ship that's designed for kids to go to school for, you may have heard of it, for a semester and then transfer back to home. So I did advanced work for them. Moved to DC, ended up in politics. The big job was I was the national youth director for Jerry Ford in his 76th campaign for president, which we lost to Jimmy Carter. And about that time, truth be told, I also discovered, so I stayed in campaign politics for Republicans at the time, and then came out of the closet and realized there was no seat at that table for me. I learned a lot of things. I love the whole Jerry Ford thing is another conversation. All that landscape has changed so much in the last 40 years, right? So it was what it was. Moved to San Francisco. Where else? And actually, it was an old girlfriend that I was trying to decide where to move, and she's like, "Kyle, San Francisco, why are you even questioning it?" So came to San Francisco, was in corporate communications for Levi Strauss, the Chamber of Commerce, a telephone company, and then one night, early on, and this would be about 79, 80, New Year's Eve. Have you ever heard the show Beach Blanket Babylon in San Francisco? It ran for about 35 years. I was somebody on the phone at Levi was, what are you doing New Year's Eve? And I said, I don't know, going to a party or something. And he says on the phone, I got the last baby, click. And I found myself on stage at midnight in Beach Blanket Babylon. It was an annual thing that the producer would do, Steve Silver, in a kick line of beefcake babies, sash and diaper, ringing in the new year with the whole special show. Came to know Steve. I want to keep this short. I don't, and you can cut out whatever you want to cut out. He came to a couple of parties I threw, which were complicated to attend. Steve used to do all the civic ceremonies for the city, inaugurals, Fleet Week, visiting dignitaries. And City Hall in San Francisco is higher and more ornate, really, than the nation's capital. It's an amazing grand staircase, wonderful stage. He was sick of doing it. He started having me loaned by the phone company to the city to do. Like I did Feinstein's second inaugural in 82. I did the next inaugural in 86 for Art Agnos, producing the Fleet Weeks. But I was being paid by the phone company and doing this work at City Hall. And this was key. My editor finally took me to lunch, and I thought, okay, this is it, because I was never there. And she goes, okay, Kyle, sit down. I'm not here to fire you. Eat your lunch. She goes, you're the best writer I have, but look how good you are at this thing you do. And I think geometrically, and which is how and that's how I consider time. I'm just good at it. And it never occurred to me I could do it for a living. But she said, look how good you are at this thing you do. Kyle, success isn't always found in the boardroom, which was an enlightening thought for somebody who was raised in the 50s and 60s, because it was all about briefcases and pinstripes and not happy as work. And if I was having a ball, 60, 70 hours a week, totally exhausted, completely fulfilled. And I never thought I could charge for it. He said, stay with me as long as you want, but I think you should do this. So in about 85, I quit and went out on my own. And I've been on my own ever since. I was at Universal Studios Florida for a year as creative director. But mostly, and I learned at Universal Studios, because that was the goal. I went into this thinking, Olympics, Oscars, Super Bowl, these are the things I want to do. And I've learned through experience, those are not what I want to do. Because who needs to work with, certain personalities. So I was at Universal about 3 months in. It was about April, May, and in came the head of marketing. And he throws this document on my desk. I was creative director for the park for Universal Studios Florida. This is before Islands of Adventure was built. He throws this document on my desk and says, oh, here's our theme for next summer. We're going to need a show. And I'm not a poker player. I looked at him and said, wait, you had meetings about next summer's theme? And I wasn't there? He was like, well, it's a marketing function, blah, 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 turf, and you're a vendor. And I was like, well, yeah, but if I'd been at that meeting, this might be your theme, and you'd have a show today. That didn't mean anything. And I just learned at that moment, I'm not a corporate guy, and where I'm best, well, to wit, after I left Universal, after a year, I moved to New York, as far away from Orlando as I could get, just to decompress. And decompressing in New York, that's another conversation. But and I was at this .com launch in Silicon Alley up down by Madison Square Park. And the venture capitalist came over to me, asked me, about myself, and I told him what I'd done. And he says, "Oh, you should come work for me." I said, "No, I don't think so." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, if I consult for you, you'll pay me really well. You'll take my advice. You'll do what I say, and we'll all be successful and happy. If you hire me, you'll argue with me all the time. You'll resent how much you pay me, and all your other vice presidents will resent me because I have the sexy job." And he goes, "Whoa, you're right." And I'm like, I learned this. So anyway, so for the last 40 years, 35, 40 years, I've been in essentially, live experience. Half of my work has been I do a lot of fundraising. The joke, in fact, on my first book, or the first edition of the book, it's in my experience, the secrets of making them cheer, weep, and sometimes write check. Because I'm very good at fundraising, getting for colleges and universities, AIDS, healthcare, better women's shelters, telling stories that make people weep and write checks. Which is a skill. The other half has been in theme parks and experience design through actually Phil Hedema, cutting way back to I'm trying to make it short, but as I said, cut what you need to cut. Phil, when I moved to LA in 1990, done with the local stuff, wanting to go wide, thinking maybe I would make movies. Another conversation for another time. I submitted a resume through Daily Variety to Universal Studios. Phil Hedema called me in, and he said, this is probably, this was 1990. And he said, "I don't know where I'm going to use you, but I'm going to use you somewhere." And we met for lunch once every 3 months or so for a while. In 92, I delivered this is it. This is the candlelight ceremony for the AIDS quilts at the Lincoln Memorial. 250,000 people. Bill was there. I had 45 minutes. And again, you'll read about it ultimately. But it went up at 8:00. It was done at 8:45. I had a window of 5 minutes at 8:45 for the finale, which was a skyrocket. And Joel Gray sang this song, Jonathan Wesley Oliver Jr., about a man who goes to the quilt to find his buddy from when they were kids in Indiana. And it's, here comes, my filter is, I can move myself, I can move anyone. But he comes to the quilt and he finds the panel for his friend, Jonathan Wesley Oliver Jr. And he says, the song goes, "Somebody told me you would be here." And when we were in Indiana as kids, we used to go fishing and catch frogs, and et cetera, et cetera. And then at night we'd sit in the barn and watch for shooting stars, and then he goes and he sings more about his daughter and this and that. And he says, "But then one night there was a fight in your house, and the next day you were gone, and now here you are." And he said, "You should have seen your father writing your name in needle and thread." It's a good song. And the last line of the song is, "Tell me, Jonathan, in heaven, are there shooting stars?" And as he holds that note, I had George Zambelli build me this huge skyrocket, and you saw the tail go up from behind the Lincoln Memorial, and the whole audience is expecting this thing, but it was an absolutely silent skyrocket, like a shooting star. Makes no sound. So it went up, and all you heard when this huge thing exploded was 250,000 people go, "Oh," and grasp their hearts. It was great, and that is probably the moment I'm most proud of. They just having the knowledge that I didn't know you could do silent sky or fireworks until like a year before. So Phil was at that show. Sorry, I love the work that I do. I'm very lucky. When I'm working, I'm very lucky. Between gigs, not so much. So then 2 years later, opening ceremonies for the closing ceremony for the Gay Games, which is, I don't know if you've heard of them. It's an Olympic model, 60 countries, 12,000 athletes from all over the world. Obviously. founded by a guy, Tom Waddell, who won the bronze medal in the decathlon in Mexico City in '68, and he was gay, and this idea was that everybody should have this experience. And you know how sports kind of winnows out people who throw the ball funny or run funny, or it's a pretty straight. Not so much anymore, I don't think, but certainly in the '50s, '60s, '70s, '80s, it's just the closet was way bigger, and so he founded the Gay Games. 1,400 people in San Francisco in 1982 to 12,000 people at Yankee Stadium in 1994. And at the end of the show, Phil's in the tech booth with me up with the press area, and the show ends, the fireworks go off. I turn to Phil, I go, okay, it's midnight in New York City. I have 60,000 people still at my show and not at the clubs in New York on Saturday night. What do you need to know? And he goes, come see me when you get back. And he hired me in attraction development at Universal, which was my first job in themed entertainment. So see, it does come around. There is a point to the story, and it was from there that I ended up getting involved in theme parks. Ended up at Universal Studios, Florida, and then I've been a member of the TEA, Themed Entertainment Association, since then, and active in one foot in both camps. So that's probably enough background, isn't it?
Okay. Well, there is one other thing that Josh asked about, and that was the guy. So you said there was a story behind that. We'd love to hear it.
It's shorter. And so I have, I didn't come through design school. I came in, I backed into all of this, and it was just whatever. So I tried like creative director, creative producer. One time I tried not to pigeonhole myself. I don't want to be, limited to one niche, because I've always done it all, from the idea, concept development, and producing it. And then as shows got bigger, I would hire like a producer or a stage manager, but it all came from me until the point where I had to spend more time with the client than at the show. So, you just grow. But in any event, at one point I put itinerant creative guy, but that seemed to confuse some people. And then I called myself an experienced architect, and I would get, are you an architect? So it's like, I don't know. And so park that for a minute. Roger Hartner at WDI had me come in about 2012 down to present myself to his global creative executive team. I was kind of, well, what do I have to teach you? Disney is who you work for, and I don't. And he said, well, my people are really great at show, but spectacle intimidates them a little bit. And I went, oh, great. Well, that's how I came in. So I didn't learn to be scared of it, So that happened. And a year later, I still hadn't, nothing came of it. And I was having lunch with Roger in San Francisco, and I said, so who did I offend? Whose toe did I step on? And why is nothing happening? And he goes, the trouble with you, Kyle, and I've had sentences start with that before. I'm like, the trouble with you is you're really good at all these different things. And Imagineering is a siloed organization, and which is no longer true. But at the time, you can't be a creative director and a producer and a writer. You can't, you can't move from silo to silo. And I said, it just seems as though, at some point somebody would say, do you know somebody who can write and direct and produce? And I would be the guy. And I went, wait a minute. So seriously, I thought, that's it. I'm the guy. And it started, obviously you see it's on my card. It says, San Francisco and the world. Only one of them says Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies for the people who can take a joke. But I'm the guy. And because then call it what you want. And I figure if it's too flip for somebody, they probably wouldn't be a good client mix anyway. And so I started as a joke, but it stuck. And so this has been 10 years now and 12 years. And at TEA, hey, the guy's here. I'm like, well, it works. So I'm the guy. And so it's like, do you know somebody who does X, Y, Z? Oh, Kyle's the guy for that. Exactly. So there it is.
And on your website, it also says that you're a creator venture catalyst, master of spectacle and story, and writer, producer, and show director. I think I understand those last three, probably more. I think those are more tangible or immediately understandable. But what's a creative venture catalyst?
Well, actually, what it says is my strength is from the very beginning the download from the client or the original visionary, listening to people and and manifesting their vision in a way they may not have envisioned it, but that works exactly as they want it. So every creative venture, I'm the catalyst for it. I build the team, I manage the ideation, the creative collaboration, the overall design, and then these days I shepherd the concept through production so that as production obstacles, things like budget, time, and gravity and physics, get in the way, I can come up with solutions to problems that keep it on course. But it's actually Chris Stapleton, if you've ever talked to him, who is great. He used to be at SCAD. Before that, he was like one of the inventors of AI way back at Universal. Very brilliant man. One of those people that when the conversation is done, you kind of need to rest because he's so damn smart. It's like, I made it. But Chris, he's the one that first called me a creative venture catalyst. It's like, great. I'll take that because the function I perform is I'm not the smartest guy in the room and I'm not the most creative guy in the room, but I am really good at reading people and empowering them and creating environments of positive collaboration and empowerment for everybody at the table. And so that's it. I catalyze the concept and deliver it. So that's, and I've actually, somebody else has started using it too. I've seen it like creative venture catalysts. It's like, great, run with it. It's because that is what we do. It's the function I perform is gathering the teams, empowering them, letting them know that I have their backs. I try to be the guy who makes the first mistake so that I can cop to it and everybody can see it's okay to make a mistake. Just make sure you cop to it and let me know. In fact, yeah, when my tenets and the different tools I use in running time, they used to, even at City Hall, the techs used to laugh at my timelines because they're like every quarter minute, there's this, and then 10 seconds later there's this, which is not a quarter minute, but everything from when the talent arrives at the green room to who goes and gets them when they leave, when they get on stage, every single thing in the every single moment in time is on the timeline. I've digressed. So when somebody comes to work for me, I like to hire a lot of young people that you just have to be smart to work for me or creative or aspirational. And of course there are, designers you want to use that are the best. And I like to mix those so the experience gets passed on. I share here's my tool. Here's how I do it. You can use this. You can do it any way you want. You're responsible for the result. I'm not going to watch over your shoulder, but you have a problem, come to me right away. And when they come to me, more often than not, they'll lay it out and go, well, what do you think you should do? And they're like, well, I came in here because I don't know what to do. Like, yeah, but you're in it. So what does your instinct tell you? And again, you're empowering somebody who's not sure of themselves, right? And they'll present their concept, and maybe it's a good idea, or maybe it's I tried that once, lost my shirt, or it blew up in my face, but let's work on this together. Or that's great, let's do that, and then I have their back with them implementing this new idea. That's how you grow people, So how do we get on that? How did I get on that? I sometimes forget the path I'm walking, but I just, that's what I love about what I do: creating experiences that move people to cheer, to support, to whatever, to laugh, weep, whatever, to engage. I like to tell, I do a lot of work for colleges and universities, and more often than not, the alumni bodies, they know their school's history, especially the Harvards and the Stanfords. It's like, it's a joke almost, somebody's gone to Stanford within the first 3 sentences, and I've done a lot of work for Stanford, but giving those audiences, sharing the history of their institution in ways they don't expect, and reintroducing those feelings of that first day on campus. I'm just good at that. I'm good at coming up with new ways to tell familiar stories. And that's how they become fresh again. People become reconnected. I use buildings like that, buildings that people may have been in 4 or 5 times before for an event. I bring them in from a different door, even sometimes up the fire escape, just so that they get a new sense of that you open up their brain and they're, well, that's comfortable disorientation. They come in the door and they know it's been pre-thought and they see where they're going, but that's not what they expected. But they feel taken care of, comfortable disorientation. They feel and they trust their experience. So creative venture catalyst. I put it together and make it happen.
Yeah. So Kyle, I'm wondering as you're talking, because you're talking about a lot of emotions, right? In your storytelling and how we get people to those emotions. And this may actually get into more of your process. You already mentioned the comfortable disorientation, but I'm curious, when you think of the emotion, the ending emotion that you want people to feel, whether it's sadness or joy or exhilaration or whatever it is, how do you, I'll just use the word architect, that experience to get them from whatever state they're in to the emotional state that you would like them to be in based on that story? Can you walk us through that process a little bit?
Yeah. Give me a minute. Actually, and one of the questions you asked me, this all came from these 5 tenets. Somebody approached me when I still lived in San Francisco the first time, wanting me to do a presentation on my methodology. And I went, methodology? I don't know. I just make it up, and it's instinctive. So I just kind of broke down like, what are the things I do and in what order, but not all the time. And I came up with these 5, exploration of assumptions. And we can talk about that, you cue me. But the first thing, well, as Joe Rohde says, he even says, there is no Disney way. Every story will tell you how to tell it. And part of a story telling you how to tell it is what you want to accomplish, what one wants to accomplish, what do you want to, and for me, it's generally a fresh look, an emotional connection. People, they come into the room, exploration of assumption is my first thing. What is my audience assuming? And I use that as a tool to then circumvent that, while circumventing preconception. But if I know what the audience is assuming, then I know how to manipulate them. But I also have to be clear on what I'm assuming and clean that out. Because, we assume all the time, every day, no matter what somebody says, sometimes we assume we know what they're going to say. And if we just wait for the end, sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes it's something different. No matter what, we have to explore our own assumptions. And so I need my own clean slate. I need to know what they're expecting so that I can, generally there's something that happens. I'm thinking of 2 things. One is the play that you read. One is like the Stanford tour I did. It was a 12-city tour. We raised $1.3 billion or something. But it would start with your basic, everybody comes together at some cocktail thing. The doors open to what people expect is dinner, but instead there's, and this is in the book too, that it's like about 30 meters of darkness with just 2 lines of people holding flashlights down so you can see the ground, the concrete. And at the far end, it's this huge cyclorama with light pouring over it. So you step in this place, you're like, WTF, but it's dark, but you see the destination and it's kind of alluring and you see where you're going to walk. So you're not worried about tripping. And so instantly people are like, well, now what? What is this? And you've got them questioning. I did a thing for Harvard in the Harvard Library, which, at Harvard, probably the first day of Harvard, they go to the library and go, wow. But by the time they leave, they're like, I never want to see that room again. And so for this, I brought them in from cocktails on the lawn, up the fire escape, 3 floors. They come in and the library was a rectangle with the main entrance at the lawn side that looked out over the lawn. So I brought them in up the fire escape and with the entrance on the short side, which when the emergency exit opens, you look down on the hallway between all the stacks, the entire length of the room. So you get a whole different experience of expanse. And I just put in some potted trees and some bee lights and then uplit all the architecture and people opened the door like, whoa, I did not remember this room being this beautiful. So coming up with a moment like that, the play, as you read, they're in a building they've been in 100 times before. They came in the fire escape, well, through the stage door, walked across the stage, entered, and it was cocktails and all of a sudden it was you know, 1970s New York City or San Francisco club, and then the lights go out, and act one, you know, the boy calling his family to come out and tell him he was dying at the same time, which millions of people did during that time. And it was, and that was a moment where everybody stopped dead in their tracks. It was very serious. When that act ended, Nancy Pelosi was backstage. She goes, "Well, that was riveting." It was like, whew. But what that did was, it was 4 acts. Each act was maybe 10 minutes or less. But when the lights went down for act 2, people put their phones down. Like, they were, what is this going to be? And each one was a different tone and a little bit more positive, just going through the 4 decades of AIDS and HIV at that point. But so in everything I do, I look for a way to introduce it that makes the audience feel taken care of. You know, that, as I say, liberation from preconception and comfortable disorientation are really the 2 strongest. So that once people know that they're safe, that they've been taken care of, that it's not a strange door and now what do I do? They're led all the way. And then you create an experience that moves or connects them. It, as you saw just a moment ago, like people who work with me a lot, you know, when I start sharing the concept and talking through the story and get weepy, they're like, okay, there it is. Here he comes. You know, I love, that's my muse. That's my filter, is if I can't move myself, then I have to come up with another idea. I am, you know, Hallmark commercials and coffee commercials. I'm a victim of all of them, but it's actually, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's just, I think it's very easy to get in a rut without knowing it, and I have caught myself as well. But there are ways that work. I don't ever want to do something unique just because it's different. It needs to have a reason or a result. And you can see sometimes, like an example I used to use is there was some fundraising, you know, to the high and mighty in New York. This guy, like he took roses and he got red and white roses, and he took the white petals and stuck them in, you know, heavily labor intensive into the red ones so that the roses were bicolor. And I just thought, that's just distracting. You know, I'd be like, well, how'd they do that? And what's going to fall out? And, you know, it's, I don't want to distract people. I want them to be engaged. Success of revelation, you know, give them a little piece and a little bit more and a little bit more, so that they're reaching for the story. And then it's, as I say, there's articulation and evocation. And we get to the last one, subliminal engagement, which is they participate in their own experience. The example being, the best example is Julie Taymor's costumes for Lion King. You know, they all are evocative. But here's the big secret. Everybody sees zebra, you know, but the thing is, everybody in the audience sees their own zebra. You know, whatever their experience of zebra is, whether it's a stuffed animal or a zoo, or they went to South Africa, you know, and I sit there and I recognize zebra, and the Pakistani woman next to me recognizes zebra, and the Irish guy on the other side recognizes zebra. We all see something different at the same moment, which creates a shared intimate experience. Because I see my zebra, everybody does. And there's this, wow, it's a zebra, you know? But everybody sees something different. And it's giving the space for that and not trying to control what people see or experience, but to open it up so that they experience it here, not here. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That's a challenge, you know, that's a challenge. And very often, well, you know, sometimes it's more expensive to make something look inexpensive, but sometimes it's actually, you know, you can do a hell of a lot with pools of light in an empty space. Just like if you've ever seen, what's Our Town? it's pretty much like there's a ladder and a porch generally when it's staged. I mean, it's all comes out of your head, and that's you can do a lot with white space, you know, and not try to fill it all in. And that's when you get back to like my blue sky. I've scared even at like at Stanford. I put out in an RFP, and one of the bids came back at like $30 million. You know, and I neglected to prepare my audience, you know, when they got these numbers, because for me, you create blue sky, like what can we do if we could do anything we wanted? And then you take the budget or the calendar and you go, okay, now we got to pull this and this and this, and how do we bring it down to this? I think you get a whole different this if you start there than if you go, here's the box, fill it, you know, because then you just keep what you really need to keep. And it's a good exercise. It's like that. What's that game where you pull the logs out of the tower of, you know what I'm saying? That it's
Jenga?
Yes.
Jenga.
Yeah, it's like that. You pull out as much as you can pull out and keeping the structure, and each thing you pull actually makes it more interesting. You know, and when the other side of evocation is you can build a horse that somebody recognizes as a horse, but not everyone. When a movie is made of a book that people love, like way back, Ralph Bakshi did The Hobbit, and it didn't look like anybody thought hobbits looked, you know, and so people reject it. Now, you know, I mean, that's you know, I think that Lord of the Rings did pretty well. I think it had quite an audience, but that's something you run into that is dangerous. Is trying to articulate something personal. So I tend to go for evocation or absolute replication. Here's what happened. Here's what it absolutely looked like. That's where the creativity is. And it isn't always, I love a big budget. Don't get me wrong. That's great. But I like the challenge of finding ways to do it without spending a ton of money. Because I don't know if you've had a chance to, on my website, like my second blog post in this new website articulates the mission I've adopted for the rest of my life, which is creating global community through shared experience. I think if you have a chance to read the first two, I'll just send you a link. The first two blogs, it's about mindfulness and what we create. I talk about there are two chromosomes that separate us from apes, so it's one community on the planet. And I don't know, it doesn't matter color, you know, it's all, religion is geographic. I mean, let go of all that stuff. We are responsible for the quality of life on the planet, and we don't have a lot of time. And if, as we create, and that's the thing my clarion call for action is, if as we create experiences, we keep in mind, because for me, I've had easily 5 careers, and each career and each gig informs the next one. The thing I've learned or done or mistakes I made show up in various ways in the next thing. And if we keep in mind that fact and keep in mind that, I mean, I can't feed all the children of Uganda, and I'm not directly responsible for that, but I am, as a human being, responsible for caring. And if I can do something about it, doing something about it. This is my philosophy. If, as we create things, we keep that in mind, it will show up. I believe it will show up in some way. Not that it will ever be articulated, but if all of we creators or anyone just keep in mind our responsibility to the planet as we build experience, I believe it will osmote beyond the berm, outside the theater, outside the stadium, just because that's who we become. You know, this is very California, but I believe so strongly in the energy and in the flow of energy across the planet, and not necessarily good and evil, but different qualities of energy. And that it's a lot of work to try to only put positive energy in the world. It's hard. I had a conversation this morning with somebody. I don't know, you know who Greg Louganis is, like the most methods ever. He is the most Zen person I've ever met. The stuff he's gone through and the way he holds it. There are times when I'm like, what would Greg do? Because he's so, I want to say forgiving. He just, even when it's tough for him, the way he handles it is a way I wish I could, you know, but if I work toward that, if we all work toward acceptance and responsibility, I think we can make a difference. There's a quote by Robert Browning. You probably know, a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? And this is my philosophy of creating experience. I mean, you go for the thing that is probably impossible to get, but you go as far as you can go, because the unreality, there's your heaven, you know, but you do all you can do. You are conscious of what you are trying to create. That's the only way to pour positivity into the world. Or I have a friend who calls the way her philosophy is taking microdoses of awe, and taking a moment, like you won't go through a door. I won't turn the screen, but I look out over a dog park and lots of trees in the Willamette River. I mean, I have a great, which is, I came from sand dunes, you know, because my previous job was in Saudi Arabia, and it wasn't quite sand dunes outside my window, but it was Saudi Arabia. And I look out there and I just take a moment, it's like, whoa, that's awesome. You know, you go through a door and just look around. I don't believe, this is way off topic, feel free to cut it. I don't believe everything happens for a reason. I do believe that we as sentient human beings can learn from everything that happens. There's generally a lesson that's personal. And I believe, as I say, in currents of energy that we can affect by being positive and by trying to touch people. I mean, that's the thing that fulfills me is moving people, is having them go, oh, or oh, I never thought of that, or whoa, I had forgotten that. You know, and because people, they hunger for the pheromonal. We're built like that, you know. And if you know, as you know, like all the forests of the world are connected deep in the ground, and you know, and the forest knows when you walk into it, and the earth is there are things we do not perceive. You know, I have no idea what a God would be, what the universe, it never ends, you know, and we can't even grasp it, but what we can do is wonder at it without an opinion. This is not at all. Anyway, thank you for letting me ramble. That's why I do what I do. I love the look on somebody's face when I've introduced them to a possible career. I love the sound of an audience when you touch them so deeply that it almost feels like velvet in the room. The air feels, you know, it's so quiet, you know, and I'm like, got him, you know. You know, this is an opportunity we have, and the world is, as we were saying at the beginning of our conversation, the world's ready for this. I mean, we became more and more polarized, and more screens in the way, and it's all great stuff. But then COVID took all that away from people, and whatever else is affecting people in not looking so materialistically anymore. Not everyone, obviously, but I think we have a chance. I'm telling you, watching this campaign, holy shit. And I'm like, whoa, this is what politics used to be like back in the 30s. Not that I was there, but you know, it's like, it's joy and positive. And I don't know if you saw Waltz's speech last night. It's on YouTube, and it's the best pep talk I have ever heard. And this is like, we haven't seen this kind of stuff in forever. I mean, I don't know. I'm going to be careful about politics here, but wow, you know, just the deep breaths and the joy in that space and is exciting. I hope that it continues. I hope it's you know, I don't want her to lose personally, but I hope it's clearly the beginning of something, or the renewal of something, an energy that the country is responding to. And I think that's, if we can live our lives with joy. I mean, I'm having a really tough time now personally, but look at this. Talking about what we do is joyful. Connecting with people is joyful. And I'm not proselytizing here. Hallelujah. We have power to change lives and to reinvigorate people. And all we need to, and I start all the way back to the origin of your question, Matt, is I start with a blank slate. What do we want to accomplish? Mm-hmm. And then make it personal. And then I'll stop. The first anecdote, the last anecdote, when I first started in this business, I was responding to an RFP at Stanford for a centennial campaign fundraising. And they had an idea that they wanted to create a train theme, Leland Stanford, Transcontinental Railroad, train tickets, this and that. The whole idea that this gentleman was downloading to me just sounded so boring, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, we can do that, and I said, well, what do you really want to do? This is sort of the key that I didn't know I had. And he says, well, we want to bring Stanford to the alums. And I looked out the window, and if you've seen pictures of Stanford, their Stanford quad, which is all stucco and rooftops and palm trees, it's beautiful. And I said, well, why don't we take Stanford then? And he said, can you do that? I said, well, I can. I had no idea how yet, but like, yeah, I mean, let's take that to all these cities. And we ended up building a set that was a 360-degree site with dimensional props, and people would walk into the Armory in New York or the ballroom in Seattle, and they'd be on campus. They loved it. And it's you have to be open to everything. And nothing I've done before is the way I need to do it the next time. And it's hard to do that. So I'm running over time here. I apologize. It's nice to have an audience.
Yeah.
There's just opportunity here for us to self-actualize and last, cut something out if you have to. I'm totally good with that. But in terms of hiring people, because as I say, I don't come from design school, and there is a hierarchy in this business of, well, where'd you go to school? It's like foreign service, oh, well, there's just a little of that in anything. When I was doing the show, the play that you read, that event, I was teaching at Apple as well. I needed a number one, and a guy I taught with, he was about 28 at the time. I said, I need a number one on this show. Why don't you come with me? He goes, I don't know anything about what you do. I said, yeah. Just come sit, watch, listen. And it was the first meeting. We all shared, ideas and concepts. And then at the end of it, and he was there on his MacBook. And I said, so, okay, good. When we get back to the office, we're going to need a document that does this, this, and this. And he goes, like this? I said, we're done. You're qualified, you're hired. And and now he has his own lighting design business in Abu Dhabi. So, I like to look for people who can explore assumption and circumvent their own preconceptions. Experience design, the experience economy, it used to be just theme parks, and then it was theme parks and FECs. And then we're like, well, retail and churches, it's really everything. Yeah. Now, with the advent, younger generations, which is everybody behind me, but more interested in the experience even than the souvenir or the people want to experience things. They'd rather spend their money on, I come from an acquiring decade, and people now, and I'm even reading things and hearing things about less people. I mean, you'll go to a concert, everybody's got their phones in the air, but there are fewer pictures being taken, if that makes sense. Yeah. People experience the thing, like for me, even back in the day when I was traveling, well, I still travel a lot, but when I was traveling for fun, I would kind of take pictures if I could put somebody in them, but otherwise I'd buy a postcard because, who's going to beat, who can beat that?
Right.
And then, when cameras first took pictures, everybody was, wild about it, but people are starting to notice, I think, like really the rewards of evocation, remembering things. You go to the theater, you might go to a concert, you want pictures because I was there and look at all these people. But if you go to the theater, you don't take pictures, Right. And you come away going, well, I do a thing in my class about, that was amazing. See, now we're on topic. That was amazing. That was amazing in two different fonts, just as a joke. And I go, can you tell the difference? between these two sentences, and we come around to it. And it's, well, the first one is, it was amazing. And that's fireworks shows and awesome spectacle and concerts. But what's amazing is what we really go for. The morning after, when you're lying in bed with your partner and it's like, man, you can't even put your finger on it, but wasn't that something last night? That was really something. And that's my goal,
Yeah.
And I think more people, everybody adopts the thing, whether it's now going to, way back when they first put voicemail on our home phones, everybody had voicemail, and then, oh no, first it was call waiting. And everybody grabbed call waiting. And then they added voicemail and everybody had call waiting and voicemail. But I actually dumped call waiting once I had voicemail because I don't want to interrupt any phone calls. But first people like grab and adopt a new thing, and then they start weaving it into their lives at some level, and in a realistic way. Anyway, I may be making this up, but my sense is that more and more people are interested in having the experience and sharing their memory of the experience, because no photograph is going to evoke, unless it's your photograph, the experience of being on the edge of the Grand Canyon or watching the Olympic ceremonies, and so experience design, as you know, we're ahead of me, I'm sure, it's important in everything, in every experience. And then of course we get into the whole conversation of what's immersive and what's experience, and everything's everything. So fine. But they being anybody building anything for any reason, it won't hurt to have some sort of creative person or experiences, don't have to be an experienced designer, but have somebody who's about the people's brains,
Yeah.
So I think you're well positioned to, not that you need my advice, but I mean, because you can interview, you can interview anyone and it's relevant.
Yeah.
Anyone who builds anything or draws anything or even goes to things, you could actually help people realize how important experience has become to them over the picture of it versus the memory. That's another thing I do, articulation versus evocation when you're creating and building design, building an experience. It's the more you want to evoke.
Yeah. I actually did want to tag on to what you were just saying there, because I'm going to my nephew's wedding this weekend, and they're explicitly saying during the ceremony, no phones. Don't take pictures. None of that. Like afterwards, of course, you can do whatever you want, but during the ceremony, no phones, no pictures, no video or anything.
See,
I'm excited. That's cool.
Yeah,
that should be
that's progress. I'm hardly a Luddite. I'm an early adopter. I teach at Apple. I love technology, but in creating experience, like one of the examples I use is you go to a beautiful wedding, and what do you see first coming down the aisle is the photographer walking backwards.
No.
I'm not here to see that.
No.
And people put up with it because that's what people do, or used to put up with it. People, and I hate to say things like kids because it's so stereotypical. I'm 70 years old, but don't just accept anymore. And to your point, like your nephew is getting married, and so that really shows a level of consciousness that the experience itself. We want to share all this with you, and we're the only people in the world who are going to see this thing and be at this thing. All of us, for the rest of our lives, will be the only ones who were there. So FOMO, everyone.
Yeah,
and,
that's powerful.
And I just think that I'm pleased to see it, because at first, I was just disappointed to see so many devices between people and the experience. I have a video of when I did the gay games at Soldier Field in Chicago. There was a moment, like first all the athletes came out, and you'll see it in the book when you finally see the book. It was a stunt where like all the athletes entered shoulder to shoulder so that they covered the field, and then the lights went out, and they all had these lanyards, but they didn't know what was on them, and their lights came on, and it was a football field sized pride flag. It was awesome. I mean, and the athletes didn't even know what it was going to be, because they had all arrived the night before. There was no rehearsal. We did it like a track meet. They walked in single file, and then they got in. Anyway, logistics don't count. And then the next scene, they all took the oath of the athletes, and then it was the oath to the officials. And I had Billy Bean, who just died of leukemia. He was the first Major League Baseball player to come out back in the day. Wonderful man, amazing heart this man had. And ultimately, the MLB hired him to be their chief diversity officer to help. Anyway, aside the point. So it was Saskia Weber, who was a women's soccer player, and Billy, and they walked. The whole idea was open field of play, two individuals, spotlight on them. And he gave her the oath of the officials, you know, as representing all the officials. And sure enough, one photographer who didn't like the rules leapt the fence, ran out to the middle of the field. And I have a video that I show in class where there they are doing the I on behalf of the officials, et cetera, et cetera. And suddenly there's this guy kneeling behind Saskia, running around, kneeling behind Billy, getting these amazing shots of something nobody saw.
Yeah. Because
everybody in the stadium saw him. And my head exploded. You know, I'm on the you know, security, get that guy out of there. So they actually ran and dragged him off the field. And we made a show out of it. He was furious. And I'm like, you're mad. You just, you know, you got in the way of everyone.
Yeah.
And I think people, I mean, I'm a fanatic, but I think like this, like your wedding story, that's great. That people, it's like, you know, you don't need your phones. You're going to have a great time here. It's people, especially after COVID, people need to connect. You know, they need to connect, and not necessarily, especially after COVID, but when it was taken away, you know, I think it became more people maybe thought about it more. People, as somebody said on the news once, like people are being nicer to their neighbors, they're meeting their neighbors, you know, but we need it as people. It's the pheromonal shared experience that counts for everything. And anyway, I have hope. I have hope for humanity.
As we start to wind this down here, if people want to learn more about you, if they want to learn more about what you do or get a hold of you directly, where would you send them?
You can always, my email is fine, you know, Kile@kileozier.com. And frankly, the book is available from the publisher. Yes, Creative Catalyst. It's also on Amazon, both in print and digital. I suggest the print because it's the kind of book you'll want to maybe write notes in sometimes. I use it as the textbook for a master class. And it's cheap. It's like $25. It's not an expensive book. And the reason I wrote the book, oh, never mind. That's another story. But Roberto Perry once said 100 years ago, I think you should write a blog and make it a book and then teach classes. And I wrote the blog for 12 years. During COVID, I put the book together. I'm like, holy shit, I know some stuff. And there it is. But yeah, I think it would help them to grab the book. It's a great read. But I am available. Send me a note. If there's some way I can help people, just give them a tip. I teach a master class, and I'm also willing to just talk to somebody on Zoom. I'm not here to buy a yacht. You know, I'd like to keep a roof over my head, but I want to leave this behind when I go. I want the stuff. Oh, that's the third one I'm going to send you. It's about ageism and the diminishing of institutional knowledge in the gig economy. But that's another conversation. I just, you know, that's all we have is as a legacy is to inspire people to, you know, to do more than they think they could do. Don't be limited. I made a ton of mistakes in my life. I've made some really bad decisions. Learned from all of them. I don't know, like if I look back and go, I want to undo that. What would I lose? I'd lose where I am now, wherever that is. So yes, if they want to know more about me, LinkedIn, my website, you have a question, feel free to use my email. I'm an open book, so to speak.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kyle, for your time today and all of your insight and all of your stories and your inspiration. We really do appreciate it. I think you said that's another story for another time, about 4 or 5 times. So we're going to maybe call you and hear some of those stories. We just want to follow up on that. But again, thank you so much for your time. And for everybody out there who is watching and listening, just remember, we are all Attraction Pros.
Arr.